Welcome to Module 6, where our primary focus is on Wade Davis's Serpent and the Rainbow, his book. That's the popular press version of his work. There's also a more academically oriented version of his work. You certainly should have completed your reading of The Serpent and the Rainbow before you jump into this module, this video, and the work you're asked to do. You may have seen the movie The Serpent and the Rainbow, which is it's kind of B-movie-ish, a little goofy. It's a Wes Craven horror movie, loosely based on the book, although really it's not like you can skip reading the book by catching the movie. It's because that's not going to work. They're quite a bit different. Wes Craven really takes quite advantage of director's license, so to speak, and he adds a lot of things in the movie that in fact don't appear in the book at all. It's a sensationalized, popularized horror movie version of the book. Anyway, so that's not really going to help you. Even though, I mean, if you enjoy sort of goofy little horror movies, you may enjoy it. Well, for a long time, zombies have been part of American popular culture, and it has a lot to do with a lot of the sensationalistic writings that were done near the turn of the century and the early part of the 20th century, especially in regard to, let's say, travel accounts and so forth, written by people who had been to Haiti. Of course, in Haiti, they practice voodoo, which has sort of been Americanized to voodoo. In fact, around 1835, there was an influx of Haitian immigrants to New Orleans, and it's thought that that's where that practice caught on down here, and so voodoo is a sort of derivative of the more authentic voodoo. So the voodoo of the American South is a sort of a derivative of what you find in Haiti, voodoo, which is a transplanted African religion, actually a transplanted sub-Saharan African religion that was sort of syncretized and mixed with Catholicism, because of course Haiti was a French colony and French Catholic missionaries had been there, and so what we find is an interesting sort of mixture of indigenous African and Catholic elements. And by the way, that's a staple of so-called African-derived religions of the New World, including Orisha, the one I study, also Santeria, something you may have heard about, Batuque, Candomblé in Brazil, and others. Well, so for a long time it was simply assumed that the zombie was a matter of folklore and B-grade horror movies. As you probably know by now, the zombie in the sort of Western American consciousness is quite a bit different than what we find in Haiti. Whether or not they actually exist, or at least is the folklore in Haiti. Because if you would watch any of the many zombie movies that are out there, you would come away with the sort of impression that zombies are something that you want to avoid. They're dangerous and they're scary. They're out to kill you and so forth. Well, ironically, though, in Haiti, which is actually supposedly the source of the zombie mythology, in Haiti, people fear being zombified. So they're afraid of the Bokors, B-O-K-O-R, those that supposedly make the magic powders, or I should say make the powders and do the magic that turn people into zombies. So they're afraid of being transformed into a zombie. The zombies themselves are relatively harmless. So again, the Western idea is totally fanciful. In fact, it's almost like a fiction twice removed, because the Haitian version is almost certainly a matter of folklore mythology, and the American version is derived from that. So it's basically a fictionalized version of something that's probably fictional to begin with. Well, Davis was sent to, as you read, was sent to Haiti to find the so-called zombie powder, because apparently some individuals had received some reports that the zombie phenomenon was actually real. And this is primarily due to an individual named Clairvius Narcisse, who supposedly around 1962 had been declared dead by an American physician and buried. According to Narcisse, a day or two later, he was actually brought up out of the grave and beaten violently and fed a sort of paste that kept him in a drugged state for a couple of years, during which time he worked on a sugar plantation. Finally, he was able to escape, and it is said that he didn't return to his home village at that point, but rather waited for his brother to die, because clearly he had wronged his brother in some serious ways. And he finally did return back to his village 18 years later after he had died. And so that's the story regarding what is supposed to be the most compelling case of a real zombie. But however, as you read from the critics and their critical reports, it's really hard to buy that whole story when an alternative explanation seems eminently sensible. So on the one hand, we have supposedly individuals who make some sort of psychoactive powder and feed it to this individual, thereby inducing a sort of comatose state. And by the way, this individual was suffering from a severe kidney ailment. And he was also refrigerated for 24 hours before he was finally buried for 2 or 3 days, and then supposedly brought back up and drugged, beat, put to work, and so forth. Well, on the other hand, one might consider the hypothesis that this was simply a case of mistaken identity. In fact, it could be outright fraud occurring, because as you read in one of the articles I posted for you, it's quite possible that someone simply used Clairvius Narcisse's name to obtain treatment at the local hospital at a reduced cost. Clairvius Narcisse would clearly have no problem with that, given the fact that he was pretty much on the run because of all the issues he was having, and he was in trouble at the time. So it sort of makes sense that he would let someone else use his name, and then that person would die, quote unquote, or maybe the person did expire. One way or the other, Clairvius Narcisse gets off scot-free, starts a new life in a different place, a hypothesis that to me is eminently more sensible than the alternative. It is mentioned by the chemist and the pharmacologist and so forth who actually examined the powders that it would be next to impossible to include in the powder the precise amount of tetrodotoxin to induce just the right comatose state without killing them. This stuff, the active ingredient in the powder, as you found out from Wade Davis, is tetrodotoxin. It's found in pufferfish, also in the infamous fugu sushi that's consumed in Japan, and it's about 160,000 times more potent than cocaine and incredibly toxic. I think Davis mentioned somewhere that the amount that would sit on the head of a pin would be enough to kill someone. So it seems to me, I have to agree with the critics, that it would seem to be almost impossible that a quote-unquote witch doctor or herbalist working with relatively crude materials could actually isolate enough tetrodotoxin, in fact just the right amount of tetrodotoxin, to bring about the desired result. Wade Davis's hypothesis is that an individual in Haiti has run afoul of social mores and customs and is sentenced to be punished by the Bazongo, the secret society, at which time he is fed or given some sort of powder that contains tetrodotoxin, bones from a recently buried child, lizards, a large toad that was actually tested and found to be Bufo marinus, which produces a bufotoxin, various plants, and also pufferfish. And they're administered this powder. They appear to be dead. They're declared dead. they are buried, and then they are later brought up by a Bokor, lifted up out of the ground by a Bokor, and fed a paste that contains another toxic chemical, Datura stramonium, which the nickname of the plant from which that's attained is the zombie's cucumber. And so it serves to more or less maintain the quote-unquote zombified state in an individual. Davis also mentions that it is more than just the powders that are needed to create a zombie. It's also the magic as well. He discusses the set and the setting and the cultural context and enculturation and the belief that's necessary to create a zombie. Because after all, Davis mentions somewhere in the book that an individual who accidentally consumes a poisonous mushroom would go immediately to the hospital to have their stomach pumped out and receive medical attention and so forth, whereas others, in search of a psychedelic high, would intentionally consume the very same mushroom and obtain a totally different result. So the set and setting, the cultural context, is very, very, very important, and Davis reminds us, and this is a good piece of anthropology, that without that we can't understand the zombie complex. There's an interesting discussion of the so-called astral zombies and the zombies of the flesh, and this occurs in part 3, Secret Societies. Supposedly, the Bokor has the ability to separate the so-called soul from the body. This gets us into a discussion of the T-bon ange, which means something like the little good angel, and the gross bon ange, or the big good angel. And the T-bon ange actually comprises our personality, our ego, our consciousness. It's sort of who we are. The gross bon ange basically is the animating force for the body. So an astral zombie would involve sort of separating an individual's T-bon ange from his body, just leaving a zombie of the flesh that's animated by the gross bon ange. Now, there's a list of infractions on page 253 in regard to the things that individuals should avoid lest they become zombified, and they pretty much read like a rap sheet, so to speak, for Clairvius Narcisse. He was a pretty bad guy. Apparently he was extremely selfish. He wouldn't share money with his family. He fathered lots of children out of wedlock, did not give the women any support. So this is a person who was definitely on the run, so to speak. And Davis's contention is that, in fact, he just ran afoul of the secret society, the Bazango, and therefore was zombified for that reason. Well, okay, I'm just filling in some spots here and there. You've read the book, and there's certainly a lot more to be said, but when it's all said and done here, I tend to come down on the side of the critics while giving Wade Davis his due. It's a pretty interesting piece of field work he did, but I just find his claims to be unbelievable. I really can't believe that individuals using rather crude materials, not that they don't have superior botanical knowledge, because they do. They have superior herbal knowledge. But I'm just talking about the tools they have to work with. They're not in labs with beakers and syringes and so forth. And so with these crude tools, I cannot believe that they were able to actually isolate the proper amount of tetrodotoxin, which, by the way, has different potencies depending on the time of the year it's collected and the particular organism it comes from, and so forth. So to me, I can't buy his thesis, and I'm inclined to believe that there are more mundane explanations for this, because after all, one can find fictional beings in virtually any culture around the world. After all, we believe in ghosts, which actually, in regard to the basic laws of physics, cannot exist the way we think they do. We also believe in demon possession. And as we've seen, there are probably more elegant hypotheses to explain that behavior. Also, there's beliefs in unicorns, Bigfoot, all sorts of weird things out there that are in fact part of mythology and folklore, but not reality. And I think that's what we're dealing with here. It's a very powerful piece of folklore, and actually one indication that we're on the right track here is that the zombie idea appears to have derived from the time that the Haitians were enslaved by the French before they fought and gained their independence in the early 1800s. So there's a historical reason for the zombie notion to be popular in Haiti. And so that's pretty much where it stands today. I'm quite sure that the zombie in Haiti is a very powerful piece of folklore, but do not exist in reality. Of course, you are certainly welcome to disagree with my thesis and put forth your own.